Hi and welcome back to the Trace Velo kitchen. So today we're going to be wrestling up a tasty little carbon fibre road bike. Now I actually picked this recipe up from a little bike shop just off the beach in Guatemala. And yeah, I've been making it this way ever since. So first up, add your frame and wheels to the mixing bowl. Now these I picked up from an artisanal Chinese eBay seller, but store-bought is fine. It looks quite small here, but it will rise in the oven, don't worry. So pop that in, then add in your saddle, your cassette, your bar tape and your chain. Just pop them in. Then add in your chosen group set. So I've got Tiagra 10-speed here. Pop that into the bowl. Next up, garnish with a few jockey wheels. Now I've got some really nice fresh green jockey wheels here, so I'm going to pick the freshest looking ones and pop them in on top there. Now finally, you'll want to season with a little bit of multi-purpose grease, and this will prevent rusting later down the line. So pop that in as well. Once that's all together, take it and pop it into the autoclave at 212 Fahrenheit for 4.5 hours. But here's a tasty little one that I whipped up earlier. Hello and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another dainty yet appetizing, like a vol au vent, Trace Velo production. My name, as always, is Luke. So, you will know if you've watched my channel for a little while that my bike here, it rarely stays in the same configuration for very long. Many times in the past, I've got to a point where I'm like, cool, it's perfect. I don't need any more upgrades. There is nothing else I possibly need to buy. £3.15p. I'm basically saving money. Now, I do still have, a few little upgrades in the post coming for this thing soon, but I thought it would be good to kind of give you an overview of my bike as it stands now and give you a total rundown of the cost of it all and the total weight of this thing as it sits in its current config. And I can also take this as an opportunity to kind of give you an update of the individual parts and how they've been performing to date. Now, this is probably going to be quite a long video with a lot of detail. So here is the order of the video. And as you can see, I'm going to be a massive YouTube knobhead and put the tasty bit about cost and weight towards the end of the video. But as always, I've slapped the timestamps into the video description, so check those if you want to skip ahead. Anyway, let's get cracking. Okay, so the frame here, which was the topic of my very first video actually, includes the fork and the seat post, and it cost me £300 or about $375 when I bought it back in late 2016. Up to this point, I've ridden it just under 20,000 miles or around 37,000 kilometers. I use it nearly every day and it is still solid. Okay, so the bottom bracket type for this frame is a press fit style of bottom bracket. And the most common criticism levied against these style of bottom brackets is they creak. In 20,000 miles, I've never had a problem with that bottom bracket creaking. I have replaced the cartridge bearings in there 3 times. Equally, the cartridge bearings for the headset. So we've got one which sits in here and one which sits up here. I've replaced them 3 times as well. And I always keep spares. So I've got a spare set of headset bearings there and a spare set of bottom bracket bearings here. So these 2 here will set you back about 12, 15 quid. So yeah, replacing them, not a massive deal. Okay, so the seat post here, you'll know if you've watched the original video that I had an issue with the seat post always slipping into the frame. And that was kind of regardless of how much I did up this seat clamp bolt here, it would still slip in. Now I tried using the old carbon fiber grip paste and that didn't really help very much. And what I ended up using to solve that problem was actually this stuff. So this is just plastic packaging, in this case from a fitted sheet. And it's slightly rubbery and slightly tacky. And basically I coated the seat post and the clamp. I kind of wrapped it in that plastic packaging. And since then it's not budged an inch. This is rock solid now. And you can kind of see There's a little bit of that packaging poking out there. I've also recently added this kind of silicone gasket, this band here, and that basically stops water creeping down the back. So when I'm riding along in the rain, water sprays up here and then it tends to kind of creep back down into the tube. So this rubber gasket here, that stops that. But there is one slight issue with this frame that's crept up and kind of become apparent literally in the last week. Okay, so these bottle cage bolts here and here, they actually screw into nuts which are integrally molded into the carbon fiber frame here and here. And on this bottle cage, in the last week or two, I'll try and show you, it started to wiggle very slightly. It's difficult to show on camera, but I believe the nut which sits in here in the frame has started to come loose very slightly. It still does up nice and tight and still holds bottle cages fine at the moment, but I believe this might fail at some point in the future. When it does, I'll probably try and fix it myself with a bit of epoxy, but still, for a frame which cost me £300 4 years ago and has done 20,000 miles, this very small issue here, yeah, not too shabby in my opinion. Anyway, let's move on. Okay, so the Toseek Carbon Aero handlebars here, I picked these up for £28 or around 35 buckaroonies. I've ridden them about 8,500 miles or 13,800 kilometers. And yet they have been completely faultless. They are a little bit of a pain to kind of recable them because the cables run inside the bar. But other than that, these are incredible handlebars. Also, just under a year ago, I paired up this handlebar with this 100mm carbon stem from Toseek again. And yeah, I paid £22 for this on eBay. And it's been absolutely great, no problems. But what I would say is that you can pick up aluminium stems, which are the same length, for less than half the price of this, which are only like kind of 5 to 10 grams heavier. So this fully carbon stem here, it didn't save me as much weight as I thought it would, to be honest with you. So yeah, maybe that's an opportunity for you to save a little bit of cash and just get an aluminium one instead. Anyway, let's keep on trucking and check out the next part. Okay, so these titanium quick release skewers here, I've obviously got one at the front and one at the back here. And I picked up both of those for £8 or around 10 bucks on AliExpress and actually saved me some decent weight compared to kind of the regular steel ones. Now, reading the comments, I was slightly concerned that the titanium shaft, which goes in here, was going to stretch over time because titanium is slightly more malleable than steel in that sense. But after kind of 5 or 6 months of constant use, I've been keeping an eye on it and I've seen nothing to suggest they've stretched at all. So yeah, these titanium quick release skewers, gold star from me. Right, so these carbon bottle cages, I've been using them again about 5 or 6 months, pretty much constantly, and nothing much to report really. They're really great. So I was slightly concerned that the carbon was going to crack around here, where it kind of affixes to the frame, because it seems relatively thin here. But yeah, no evidence of that at all. They're still rock solid. So yeah, £15 for both of these, again, can recommend. Okay, so I've done about 1,500 miles or around 2,500 kilometers on this crankset so far. And it's a fully aluminium construction, both the chain rings and also the axle spindle, which runs through the middle. Now, a couple of people pointed out that the steel bearing surfaces of the bottom bracket cartridge bearings, which I showed earlier, were going to eat away at the softer aluminium. But let me pull this thing off and I'll show you what the wear on this crankset looks like. Okay, so here's what the crank looks like off the bike, and let's have a look at the teeth first. So wear is relatively minimal, I would say. It's not even worn all the way through the anodized coating yet on all of these teeth. So let's have a look at the other side. Yeah, I would say wear is pretty minimal on the teeth, nothing really to write home about there. In terms of the axle, this is the part of the axle that's been contacting the steel bearing surface, and it looks like it's worn, but trust me, that's just surface oxidation. There's actually very little wear into the meat of the metal. So if this is what the wear looks like after kind of 1,500 miles, I'm pretty confident we're gonna get some decent mileage out of this axle. But there is another issue that I faced with this crankset. It is also completely free of creaks or groans, which is a massive bugbear of mine. Okay, so this part was completely free of creaks and groans up until about 6 weeks ago, when I noticed that every time I got the power down I heard a slight clicking noise emanate from my drivetrain, and I narrowed it down to this crank. So what I did was I took it apart using these 3 bolts here, and I noticed that on the surfaces between the chain rings and the crank arm, just sort of in here, it was completely dry. There was no paper gasket, no lubrication or anything. So that means that every time I put the power down and there was a very, very slight deformation of either the chain rings here or the crank arm, it produced an audible clicking noise. So whilst I had it apart, I put a tiny layer of grease between these 2 parts and put some fresh thread locker on the bolts, bolted it back together, and yeah, it's completely fixed it. No noise coming from this anymore. So you might never run into this issue if you've got yourself a set of these cranks, but yeah, worth noting that if you do get a slight clicking noise from your crank, it's a super easy fix and took me like 5 minutes. So yeah, worth noting. Anyway, let's move on. Okay, so carbon saddle here, £15 from eBay, and I've had it on since about August last year. Much like the crank, which I've taken off, has started to creak a little bit. This mainly happens when you're kind of riding along and you're sat on the saddle and you go over a pothole and basically load the saddle with your full weight. You get a creaking noise. Okay, so I'll use this saddle here to demonstrate what's going on with the saddle on my bike, because basically it's constructed in exactly the same way. And you should be able to see that the rails for the saddle mount to the saddle body by fitting inside these cups. So the rails kind of fit up inside them. And the rails on that saddle up there have started to wiggle very slightly inside of these cups. So what I've done is I put a little bit of oil inside the cups here, because as I mentioned, any slight movement, regardless of how small, between 2 unlubricated surfaces can lead to creaking. So a little bit of oil in there has solved the problem. Now I weigh about 11.5 stone, maybe about 75 kilograms, and I imagine this issue might be a bit worse or exacerbated slightly for heavier riders. So that's worth pointing out. I mean, not a massive deal for me, and I've fixed it, but I've got to keep you abreast of these things and let you know what's going on. So anyway, that's that saddle. So let's move on to the next component. Okay, so the Farsports wheels here, if you were to buy them yourself, would cost about 550 quid or around 700 bucks. And to date, I've ridden them 1,723 miles, which equates to 2,773 kilometers. I've got it written down there. And at least half of that has been on my commute through kind of crummy London roads and stuff. And what can I say? These wheels have been absolutely faultless. The DT Swiss 350 hubs, the bearings in them, still super duper smooth, and the brake tracks on both wheels. Yeah, I'll show you some close up, but the wear on them is absolutely minimal. And yeah, I am super duper impressed. It's almost as if these are still box fresh after all that mileage. So really impressive. But most impressive, in my opinion, and I'll throw up some close-up shots to demonstrate this, is the fact that I've not touched the spoke tension, yet the front and the rear wheels still run dead true. You might recall that on my eBay carbon rims here, for the same mileage, I basically had to replace the free hub because the bearings inside here were completely shot, and I'd also had to retrue the wheel very slightly on 2 occasions. So yeah, these Farsports wheels are incredible and they are the real deal. So yeah, all good. Anyway, let's move on. Okay, so I've popped my crank back on the bike here, and these Xpedo Magnesium Pedals cost me 25 quid or 30 bucks on AliExpress, and as promised, I have kept them on my bike. I've sunk about 600-700 miles into these pedals, but I just don't like them very much. One of the issues I stated in the video where the pedal would kind of stick in position when you unclipped. The really thick grease around the bearings means the pedals kind of stick in place when you clip out. They don't come to rest in a downward position. That issue has solved itself, so you can see the pedal comes to rest in a downward position, which helps enormously clipping in and out in a hurry. But the squeaking issue, oh, that's pretty bad. That issue keeps cropping back up, especially when you're on a climb. You're kind of head down, grinding away up the hill, and then and every squeak compounds my disdain for these pedals. Another issue with these pedals is the fact that the cleat release tension has not remained consistent for me. It's kind of difficult to film, so I'll throw up some pictures, but you should be able to see that the screw in the back here, where you increase the tension, should kind of sit in this recess in the clear plastic. But the more tension I've added, the more it kind of migrates outwards, and it's got a lot worse over time. Now, I'm not one to suffer crap products just for the sake of it. And these pedals, in my opinion, fall squarely in that camp. So yeah, I don't like them. I'll be removing them from my bike, and I suggest you don't buy them. Anyway, after that glowing review, let's get on to the last component. Okay, so initially I wasn't even gonna bother covering off the Sensah Empire Groupset in this video, as I've only just done a video on it, but I know people would still be curious and they'll be asking me questions. So very quickly, I paid 80 quid or 100 bucks on AliExpress for both shifters and the front and rear derailleur. So pretty cheap. And to this date, I've put 350 miles or 560 kilometers through the Groupset. The SRAM double tap-esque shifting of the Sensah shifters is much easier and 100 times more reliable kind of when you're used to the system. Front derailleur works fine, no problems there. Downshifts at the rear are superb, easily as good, if not better, than any of the Shimano setups I've used in the past. Upshifts are not quite as foolproof. If a Shimano upshift at the rear was 100%, an upshift on the Sensah setup here would be about 95%, if you kind of catch my drift. But still, once this is all dialed in, shifting is pretty tasty. And yeah, I'm actually really enjoying using this Groupset. Plus, it runs quite silently as well, which is something I always appreciate. Also, I was reading the comments this morning on the Sensah video that I published just before this one, and one of the commenters mentioned that the Sensah shifters here are going to be fantastic to use with gloves, and I thought about it, and they're totally right. So on a Shimano shifter, you've obviously got the separate levers for shifting up the range and then down the range. Even on SRAM, you've got the brake lever, and it's separate from the shift lever underneath. So to kind of use them reliably, you need to maintain some level of kind of dexterity. So using them with gloves is a little bit of a pain. But on the Sensah shifters up there, it's just the one lever. So you could even use them with mittens and you'd still be able to kind of brake and shift reliably. So yeah, definitely something to think about. And once again, comment section, drop in some knowledge on me. So yeah, appreciate that from you guys. Okay, so a number of people asked me what cassette I had chosen for my new wondrous 11-speed setup, and I chose one of the cassettes where the top 4 set of teeth here, these top 4 gear sprockets, they're milled from a single block of aluminium, and the rest of the teeth down here are just regular steel. So this cost me about 50 quid on AliExpress, although I've seen them for about 35 recently, and it saves me about 80 to 100 grams compared to a full steel cassette. Now the notion is you don't use these top 4 gears very much unless you're kind of doing a lot of climbing. So you spend the majority of your time in these bottom set of gears here, which I found is actually true. But still, I'm a bit concerned about how long they're going to last, because it's only been 350 miles and I can already see some quite serious chipping on these aluminium teeth here. So I can't recommend you go out and buy one of these just yet, even though the weight savings are pretty tasty, because this setup could be complete garbage. But yeah, I'll keep you posted and I'll let you know how this wears over time. Right then, so that is the update and rundown of all the major components on my bicycle. So let's get into the tasty, the meaty bit, the tasty part. So my bike, as it stands here before you in this current config, cost me a total of £1,279.55, or just over 1,500 bucks. Now I haven't included any kind of customs or import duty on top of that, because there's no guarantee that you'll pay the same as I did. But if you want to, add another 80 to 100 pounds for UK customs clearance for these parts. Anyway, if you want to see the total cost breakdown of all the parts, pause the video now. Okay, right, I'm gonna weigh it now, trying to show you there's no funny business. And I'll put this on the scales. And the total weight is, if I can get that into frame, not sure what that is actually, what does it say? 7.6 7.65 kilograms. I'll see if I can bring that in. 7.65. And yeah, and there's the bike. So I haven't taken or added anything off. Yeah, there we go, 7.65 kilos. Pretty impressive, I would say. Now, the majority of bikes that you buy actually come without pedals or bottle cages. So if I take those off, my bike actually comes to 1,239 pounds and 7.38 kilograms. Also worth mentioning is that the majority of bike weights that you see online, they're weighed using either a small or a medium-sized frame. This is a large frame. This is a 58 centimeter frame. So kind of keep that in your mind as well. Anyway, let's see what that kind of cash can get you in terms of a name brand bicycle. Okay, so we have 1,239 pounds to play with, and I tried to find 11-speed rim brake road bikes around this price point. So from Cannondale, for £1,000, we have the CAD Optimo 105. Now this is less money than my build, but swap the Farsports wheels for my unbranded carbon wheels, and you can drop the total build price to £989. Now this Cannondale has an aluminium frame with carbon fork, aluminium training wheels, and externally routed cables, plus it's nearly 9 kilograms, so not much competition here really. Similar story with the specialized 2020 Ales Elite, £1,049, aluminium frame, carbon fork, shallow aluminium training rims, and again pushing 9 kilograms. Moving on to Trek, 1,550 quid will get you the Edmonda SL5, full carbon frame, but regular aluminium training wheels and 8.68 kilograms, so over a kilo heavier. Giant next, 1,600 quid will get you a TCR Advanced 2. Again, carbon frame, but shallow aluminium training wheels and 8.4 kilograms, so 360 quid more and over a kilogram heavier. For 1,400 quid, the likes of Canyon will get you an Endurance CF7, full carbon frame build, but the good old aluminium training wheels again, and a weight of 7.96 kilograms. Also, just for the hell of it, Cervelo, the closest I could find, was the R2, 8.5 kilos and 2,300 pounds. Now, Canyon are known for having some great value bikes, but the closest Canyon build I could find in terms of similar kind of specs to the build I put together was the Aeroad CF7, but that weighs more at 7.6 kilograms and costs 2.5 grand. So you should be able to see, with the build I put together, you get a hell of a lot for your cash. Okay, so right now I suspect there are a couple of people watching that are kind of raring to jump in and start building one of these, and there are a lot of benefits. It's friggin' cheap. You've built it yourself, so if anything goes wrong, chances are you can fix it yourself. You don't have to buy everything in one go. You can kind of upgrade as you go. It's crazy addictive, and it's such a rewarding hobby, in my opinion. But let me tell you something about this cheap Chinese carbon fiber life. It ain't all peaches and cream, baby. Now, I could quite easily put a thin, dazzling veneer over this whole thing and be like, yeah, buy all this cheap Chinese garbage and get a super bike. What, like no drawbacks here. But yeah, I would basically be lying. So sit back while I tear this dream to shreds. No, but seriously, there are a couple of drawbacks to this approach, and I would be remiss if I didn't make them clear to you. Also, just bear in mind that these Farsports wheels here are basically exempt from all this because they're from a legit manufacturer and they're friggin' amazing. Anyway, let's get on to the drawbacks. For many of these parts, there is no warranty. So the Farsports wheels here, they do have one, but if you bought these unbranded Chinese carbon wheels here and they become defective, good luck getting a replacement. The same goes for the frame, the handlebars, the stem, the bottle cages, the skewers, the crank here, and the Groupset as well. So in that sense, buying these parts is a bit of a gamble. You do have kind of some buyer protection through things like PayPal, but it's just not the same as buying from a legit manufacturer. You don't get instructions or tech specs with any of these parts. For example, I have no torque specifications for any of the bolts on my bike. I've always just done it by feel. You can probably find some generic torque specifications online, but yeah, if that level of detail is kind of important to you, then definitely shop elsewhere. Now, not many people bear this in mind, but quite a lot of local bike shops will just flat out refuse to work on these bikes for you. there's no technical specifications for any of these parts, like I said. So if you bring one of these bikes into the shop, the bike mechanics won't want to take on the risk, and they'll probably just point you to the door. Quality is not guaranteed, and there is kind of inherent risk in using these cheaper parts. My unbranded carbon wheels here, these are a great example of that. When I first got these, I mean, I had no idea whether they were any good. I mean, I'm not a carbon fiber engineer. I don't really know what good looks like, but I kind of put it through my own quality tests in a way. By taking it easy for the first 100 or 200 miles, I made sure I was personally happy with them before kind of trusting my life with them on a descent at like 60 kilometers an hour. And that's kind of the approach that I take with all of these parts here. You cannot just assume they're going to be good quality straight out of the box. Now this, in my opinion, is the most important thing to be aware of going into a build like this. Using these kind of cheaper bike parts often requires some kind of problem solving or a little bit of ingenuity on your part. For example, this crank here was fine out of the box. 600-700 miles in, it developed a clicking, so I had to strip it apart and grease those two surfaces, as I said. Yeah, problem solved. It's great now. The frame, when I first got it, the seat post kept slipping in, so I had to find a way to stop that and use a little bit of plastic packaging. Problem solved. These wheels here, they were fine out of the box, but I needed to re-true them on 2 separate occasions. Now they're rock solid. The frame here again, when I first got this frame, the rear derailleur sat at a funny angle and it didn't shift properly. So I actually had to shim the rear derailleur hanger very slightly just to bring the rear derailleur in line. Now it's flawless. So I kind of hope you're kind of understanding where I'm coming from. This bike and these parts perform at a really high level, but in quite a lot of cases, to keep them at that kind of top level does require a bit of ingenuity and a little bit of problem solving. Now, if you bought a brand name bicycle, then I suspect you would never have to deal with these little issues. And if you did, I mean, fucking send it back. I mean, you've paid your money. And that's the crux of this whole issue. You can save a shed load using this approach, but you could argue you pay in other ways.
Let's just say you don't pay with money.
Now, I am in no way trying to kind of gatekeep this approach. I love the fact that I have to kind of tinker with my bicycle. The level of satisfaction that I get from knowing this bike is totally mine, totally free of creaks and groans, shifting perfectly and riding smoothly because I put the effort in, is immense. And the fact that it cost like a third or maybe a quarter of what other people have paid for a bike of this caliber is the cherry on top of the cheap Chinese carbon fiber cake. I would recommend this approach to basically anyone. I mean, I'm just some douchebag. I mean, I don't have a background in bike maintenance or any training or anything like that. I've literally just picked this up as I've gone along. So if I can do it, I very much suspect that you are also capable. Anyway, that's it. That's all. That is all we've got time for in this episode of Trace Velo. So subscribe if you like this kind of stuff. Hit the like button if you enjoyed this video. And yeah, if you've got any questions or any comments about bike building, this build or bike building in general, throw them down in the comments below and I'll try to get back to as many of you as I can. Anyway, I'll see you all in the next episode. Also, if you want to see some super sexy bike pics of the same bike in different places, because this is my only bicycle, then go and check out my Instagram, link in the description. See ya.